Just for you. No pressure. Good. All right. So how's everybody been doing meditation-wise? Yeah? Any discoveries? Victoria, you had that great one last week. Veronica, excuse me.
This week, my mind decided that it could wander as long as it only wandered to the meditation class. So I had to use a bit of a machine.
Okay, good. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did.
I don't think that's allowed.
Right. Yeah, well, it's, it's funny. They say at some point that just the, I think Ben had emailed me about, getting to this place where the amount of energy that it might take to actually use the anecdotes, to use the corrections, to like use your recollection or your watchfulness and so forth, that sometimes that becomes your object. Just trying to come back onto the object. And that's, it's, you can let yourself off the hook in that moment because the truth is that, okay, you're already off the object. So it's like the penalty is done, the flag has been thrown, so now it's just a matter of bringing it back on. But what's great about it is that the mind isn't so wandering off necessarily to, what's going on this weekend or something like that. There's actually the effort you're trying to do there to bring it back on. So that's a very good thing. Anybody else?
Well, I've always had this difficulty focusing on the object.
Mm-hmm.
I've been having a hard time with that, so I've been kind of scrapping that.
Yeah.
And it just seems like what wants to happen in my meditation is that I'm focusing on a white light energy.
Mm-hmm.
That just seems to keep coming.
Hmm.
I try hard to focus on my object, and then it just seems to be like a burden. Like it's kind of like all I'm doing is constantly trying to focus on this object, and it comes in and out. I don't have any clarity. I can't see the object clear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it seems like I keep going towards this. Just something's telling me just look into this light of energy.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way I can describe it.
And that's what you're using, kind of almost identifying as the teacher?
Yeah.
That's good.
So
That's good.
It just seems to work better that way for me
Mm-hmm.
than kind of like,
Yeah.
it's like saying that there's different ways of getting from point A to point B, and instead of being fixated on one, I was like, well, this seems to want to be coming into my consciousness, so.
Right. Well, and that's really, yeah, it's also really good the fact that, now it's at this point now when it's been a couple of weeks that you're aware of what keeps coming up in that way. This is when it becomes so valuable to see like, oh, this is what continues to keep happening. Because as it does, for instance, if it's just a matter of staying with that light, which is very useful. Especially if there's any moment in your mind that you're identifying that light with the label, with the word of teacher, because that also then that's doing something from a very deep place of humanizing it and putting it into a context also that then you can feel, so when you have those moments of like, it's such a basic thing for all of us. It's like if you go and you look at the sun, there is actually a sensation that we feel with that. So certainly with light in particular, when you've closed your eyes and you're actually able to call up something that you are trying to fix your mind on, and that single-pointedly it's this source of light, even as it's varying in terms of its clarity. And at the same time, that every however long it happens, you're still reminding yourself that, and this object is my teacher or is the teacher at the same time. And then it's fine as you progress, because eventually what can start to happen is that you can reach the point of where, when you're mindful of, okay, this is what keeps drawing me off. My mind goes to this or it goes to that, or I'm just really having trouble making it clear and sharp and crisp, then that's exactly what can be your focus for the meditation. You can sit down because you've been able to catalog that that's my common issue, and then that becomes your focus. Because that's what's so beautiful about this whole series, is that it's a matter of you being able to identify where you're at in the process. So that's why there are people that are doing this who've been meditating 20 years, and they're able to take something as simple as this and be like, wow, that's what I do. I have the tendency to really let myself go into a subtle dullness. Like they're able to identify, they can clearly see their teacher, they stay fixed on him or her, and then they're just kind of hanging out there. And then they realize, and this is why they say this about some of the most amazing practitioners who've been doing it for decades, and they realize, oh my God, I've been doing this for so long. I haven't been having a feeling experience of this person in the room with me. That there's this living, breathing presence. Because ultimately, whether you're seeing like the specific form of them and their face and their eyes and so forth, it keeps going back to the fact of having the sense of something being in the room with you which is alive. Because it's only then that you can start to really get to what we started talking about last week, which is looking at what's the ultimate nature of that. How, what's the value of that? Now that you feel something warm and alive in the room with you, what can you do with that? And that's when I guess I should have a pen. You have a pen? That's when we got into, bringing up the ultimate object. Exactly, of this. Which is the fact of really understanding how things are really working. So that's good. It's perfect what's happening for you right now, and it's so important that you're really identifying that versus letting it go. Like, yeah, all right, well, let's see what happens this time. Because then that just, that obviously just builds up a habit of being lax, and so karmically speaking, that's going to just continue to grow, until eventually this is what happens, is that you just stop doing it. You just stop doing it, and that's, that's what's so great about, what everybody's doing in this room, which is continuing to keep working at it, no matter what point you're at. So that said, let's meditate. Assume your favorite posture. Make sure that back is nice and straight, because that really affects your breathing the most, is having straight back with your chest nice and open and relaxed. And start to watch your breath. Stay with your breath. Now go to the side of the mountaintop, to your retreat cabin, in that special room. Sitting in that room quietly, peacefully, and golden sunlight pouring in, filling the entire space. It's like molten gold. Just glowing. Look out the window, up to the deep blue sky. Stay with it, just the blue sky. Picture your teacher sitting in front of you in the room. Be content in their presence, not doing anything, not saying anything, just sitting in a golden room, quietly, in each other's presence. Object of this meditation is the feeling of being in their presence. That's it. The feeling. Stay with their presence. Slowly come back to this room and open your eyes. Dimitri, could you please close that outside door? All right. Well, let's do a little recap. So, I know I need it. I don't know about you, but I find it always helpful. You know, it's interesting, and there's this one acting method known as Meisner. Some of you might be familiar with it. And it's really based upon repetition. It's such a very simple technique, simple process, but unbelievably profound. And it's very apt as to why that is the same in this situation. You know, I believe actually, like the French refer to, the way they refer to rehearsal is they say répétition, you know. And so just like this meditation, just like everything that we're learning here in the magic map, you just keep going back over it until there's one day you don't need to anymore. I mean, it's like, you know, there's so many things practical like that in our lives we can look at. You know, learning to ride a bike. You know, there was the training, the fallings, you know, all the scraped knees and everything else, and the, you know, scraped egos that went along with that. And then one day it was something like, I'm fine. I know how to do this thing. You know, this is the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing, really. So, yeah. Back to the map. So, last week, I think we started somewhere around, yes, I think we started here in the flames, number 7, which the flames are about the power or intensity of focus that we need to exert to make the corrections in meditation. So it's just like how hard we have to try to do that, to actually remember what it is we're trying to meditate on, you know, or be watchful of what we're trying to do. And it's perfect too, because in terms of the positioning, because it gets right into then the 4 modes of focus. So, you know, literally how much we need to, or how intensely we need to focus our efforts, you know, in terms of trying to do this. So in the first 2 levels, we call it forcefully concentrating, and it is just that, isn't it? I mean, it's pretty much, you know, for many of us right now, you know, we might be kind of hovering around the first 2 levels of meditation as opposed to the 9th or 8th, which some of you are. Congratulations. But for most of us who are hovering around the first 2, that's really what it feels like. We need to be very forceful with our concentration. And it's just like, okay, I'm totally off, you know, and it's either, you know, it's recollection or watchfulness, time and time and time again. So the first two levels is forcefully concentrating, and then fortunately the next 5 levels is, they refer to it as focusing in a stream but with interruptions or patches where we're off the object. So this is pretty fortunate in the sense of that we move along the road pretty far up, through these 5 levels, because we're actually now starting to get some fixation. We're actually on the object for a moment, or we've got clarity for a brief second or something like that. And all of those are an accumulation of where we're actually starting to build a stream throughout the meditation, but we're constantly still having the interruptions of my mind is going to this, or my mind's there and it's totally fuzzy. So that's what really the experience is up to what it would be level 7. And then in the 8th level, which is right up here, is an uninterrupted stream, which that really boils down to we've acquired the technique so well that we can sit down, exert a little bit of effort. Come on in, man. Exert a little bit of effort, and we're there. We're there. We're there for the entire period of meditation without any interruption. And that takes us right to the 9th level, where then it's totally effortless, totally effortless. And they call it focus effortlessly for that very reason. So there's no energy that even needs to be put towards like, okay, I'm going to meditate now. This is what we've been talking about in terms of living in a meditative state of mind. That's really what that level is about. Yeah, I think we had talked about, at some point that, moving through these levels is somewhat like what Geshe Michael talked about was using the analogy of driving, driving down the road, and how, it's based, we have the 2 ditches, we have the ditch of distraction, the ditch of dullness, and that's basically here's the road of our meditation, and we've got both hands on the wheel right now, and it's like, something like, oh God, when am I going to have to eat? I mean, it's so severe, that it's like you have to crank the wheel to make a correction. I mean, that's how it can feel right now, that it takes that kind of force and that kind of power to actually stay with what your object is. Now, when it starts to, get better, and it moves into what is that 3rd level of focus, and it's sort of like, I kind of get the image of sort of like, you see this really, cool guys like Steve McQueen or something like that, who are just kind of like driving, like with their like wrist on the steering wheel, and it's, totally relaxed, but, they're still having, or like someone like Snoop Doggy Dogg or something, who's like maybe just like driving with like a ring finger, it's just like that cool, that nearly effortless, but there's still something there. And then the 4th level is you're in the zone. And I have a feeling that maybe, most of us have kind of had a sensation of that maybe when we've been driving. If you've been out in some part of the country and so forth where it's been a beautiful open space, and you're just, trucking along and you feel really calm, very much at peace, and you can be like tooling down the road at 75 miles an hour, but your body is completely, it's just completely at peace with all of that. And that's really what that 4th mode of focus is like, where it's like you're in your meditation and it's just all good, and you're not even needing to put any thought behind it because you've made it that far. All right, so then we got to, yes, then we were moving up in the bend here. So this is the first bend in the road, which number 8 is pointing to, which is then the second of the 6 powers, which would be contemplating the teachings. So actually thinking about what it is we've been talking about here each week when we're not here, which really is exactly what propels you to the next level of meditation, and that's what number 9 is. And it's keeping the mind on the object with brief continuity. So sort of like what you were saying, it's like if you have a moment there where you're actually, you feel like you have a sense of the object, that really is a taste of the second level of meditation. It's like you have brief moments of continuity. And I love the fact that Finn here, our beloved monk, he's just totally stoked at this point. Look at him. He's like coming out of the bend, the arms are still open because they're, as we all will experience at some point, like Veronica, like last week, like when you have something pop that is good in the meditation practice, then it's like, oh man, that just puts some pep in your step completely. And you can see in the illustration here of them doing that, of showing that now it's like he's turning and looking ahead as to what's going on here with the elephant, which, once again, is our mind. And when we were talking about the little yarmulke at the top of his head, and that's really where the crown of dullness in terms of it turning white or basically starting to get some space in there, because he's actually starting to have some moments of fixation, where he's actually on the object a little bit, and then with the monkey in front of him in his little white yarmulke, he as well is also, representing distraction, is having now moments of clarity in terms of the quality of attention. So that's really what's starting to kick in here, is that now that you're starting to have you're on the second level of meditation in your practice, you're having brief moments of continuity, and what that continuity translates to is any kind of combination or the singularly. You're on the object, you're staying with it, or you're having some moments of clarity. So thus, this blackened color, and it's so apt that they're doing it from the top of the crown, because we associate so much with all of our thoughts and our thinking and everything up here, that now it's like, oh, there's some little bit of space that's starting to happen, and as we've looked before, it gets better and better as we move further and further up. So then we moved on to 11, which was actually pointing here, which was talking about all of the symbols for the sense agitations. And yeah, this is where we got really into the treasure map sense of this. So going through the senses, we have this here, the cactus, representing sound. That sound is the type of distraction. They said it cuts like a thorn of a cactus into your meditation. And then we have, for taste, right here is the bolt of silk. Excuse me, not taste, touch is the bolt of silk. And then for taste, we have the 2 peaches here. And for scent or smell, we have the conch shell here, which that was actually because they have the saffron water in the conch shell. And then for sight is up here with the mirror, which is, of course, those objects which are attractive to the eye. And then I was thinking about the 6th sense, which is the object of the mind, which can be either physical or imagined. So, we had talked about like you're in the middle of your meditation, and you just have the thought of the taste of a warm cinnamon bun, just the thought. You haven't smelled it or anything like that, just the thought of it, and that can distract you. That's getting into the sixth sense, and I think it's very interesting. I mean, I don't know entirely myself, but since that's the object of the mind, the sixth sense, in many ways you could almost see that that's the entire map, that there is no specific physical necessarily form like the two peaches or something that they've actually used here, but in a way you could see the entire mind as the entire map as a representation of that. Because once we really, get really damn good at this, what really then becomes your primary MO is just the object. And it's just a matter then of you having what we would call the direct perception of that object. And so that's really the deepest level. That's the highest level of the meditation where it's going. So I think it's very cool that, and I don't know, there very well could be, someone, you could come along and be like, oh, actually the sixth sense is this leaf right here. But I don't know, this seemed kind of cool to me. It could be the whole map. So certainly someone thinks about this during the next week, come back and tell me if they found something else in here. So, and that, as I said, the object of the mind, it was really about emptiness. And that's what, we also delved into last week. We talked about how, using other terms for it, other labels for it, that it could be potential or availability, possibility, and the kind of more grandiose phrases for it, which would be the ultimate nature of reality, or from a practical standpoint, the way things really are. And something that, in preparing for class that I was thinking about is that when we had talked about it being potential, if that's what emptiness is, if it is pure potential, it's the potential of everything, then, and that would mean that it could be creation itself, that it also could be emptiness. Another term you could use for that would be the mother. So think about that. There's something to me very beautiful about that at the same time, that if everything that we perceive is something that is created by our mind, that then you're regarding everything as the mother or a mother. And yeah, have some fun with that, because that can go a lot of places. It's important for us to remember that when we're talking about emptiness in this regard, that the word is referring to the absence of something, of what we think is there. So it's not nothing. I mean, it's not ever the case where it's this void. It's the absence of what we think is there. So the Tibetan term for that was the gaksha. Remember, we were talking about that kind of experience of a sense of emptiness would be that sort of feeling of, like someone being like, gotcha, so it's really apt that word is used for that. And it's exactly that. It stands for the object we deny. And it's a tricky phrase. I mean, I know for myself, it took me a while to really work on that to get an understanding of it. But that's why this pen was so useful. We had basically determined that, for us, that the pen is a writing instrument, and that for the dog it was a chew toy. because if the pen was coming from out there, if it was coming from its own side, then the dog would use it as a pen as well. But we went through that as to that's not the case. That's exactly why we keep coming back to this object, because it can explain the entire understanding of how things are working. Now, the fact of when we say it's not coming from its own side, how do we know that? We said that, well, okay, because the dog comes in here and they start chewing on it and so forth. But what that also points to is that when the dog starts chewing on it, that actually threatens our concept of it as a pen. Because when that happens, particularly if it's your pen, and the dog is sitting there, he's like, just chewing this thing to bits, it's just like, dog, give me that back. It's not a chew toy, it's a pen. That's it right there. That's our attachment to this as some self-existent object that is called a pen. So that's the moment where we have to stop ourselves and say, well, now wait a minute. It's understandable for the dog that it's a chew toy for them and it's a pen for me, but what that proves to you right in that moment is that it's impossible then that this can be coming from its own side. And that moment that we wrangle with that, where it's just like, stupid dog, take that out of your mouth. The dog is not stupid. In fact, what the dog is actually giving us a great teaching of there in that moment is our own ignorance. Because we're actually doing the same thing. It's a pen, it's not a chew toy. And that's the problem. That's the problem that we'll be able to undo by actually talking about what emptiness is. I mean, how much does a pen that comes from its own side or from out there exist? I mean, it would seem to me that you'd have to say zero. It's just not the case. And that's really what the gotcha is. That's the object that we deny. And we started to get into the reason for that is because we have some seed or impression implanted in our mind that forces us to see the pen the way we do, or see the object as a pen. And the fact is that it's important for us to understand that if we do believe in that, if we do believe that cause and effect, that seeds bring about these results, where that's coming from is our minds. So it's coming from here, not from out there. And that's what's essential, is that if we keep bringing ourselves back to that point of that, well, the reason I perceive this thing as a pen is coming from my mind, and it's not coming, the pen is not standing up and saying, hey dude, I'm a pen, in case you didn't know. It's the fact of we have had a previous moment in our mind where we have perceived something like this as a writing instrument that we then label as a pen. But it's important to keep coming back to the fact of that it's only possible to be a pin because it's coming from us and not from out there. This is why we keep going back over this. You know, at some point, we've got to have a picture in our minds of a pin that could be a pin without us thinking of it as a pin. That would be the ultimate seed. When we talk about impressions in our mind, because that seed understands the emptiness of this. Yeah, it's a little deep. It gets deeper and deeper. But I mean, we all know that this pen, conventionally speaking, you know, comes from a factory. You know, whoever made this, Sonix. Wow, that's a cool name. But is a pen that is made by the mind unreal? No. A pen that would be not made by the mind would be unreal. Because it's made by the mind, it works. You know, if it wasn't, it wouldn't work. In fact, I don't know what the hell this thing would be. You know, but because I have the seed to see it that way, it can then function. It can then be a pen. Now, it's very important, you know, as we continue to discuss emptiness, that we don't, you know, swing to the extremes of thinking, well, you know, if everything is just a projection and so forth, then nothing is real, everything's just an illusion, or even worse, that it doesn't matter. I mean, it's actually completely the opposite of that. You know, because everything is empty, because everything has the potential to be anything, you know, because, you know, because we can think about this person in our meditations as a teacher who can teach us something to realize how things are really working in the world, then everything matters. And everyone matters. And that's exactly what we're really doing with this meditation practice. It's why ultimately we're looking at focusing on the emptiness of the teacher in this meditation, because when we understand that, then we do see that all things are possible. You know, all things are possible. Come on in, man. You know, it's not going to liberate you to think that there's no pen here, that there's just this void, and that there's absolutely nothing there at all. You know, what will liberate you is to then think that there's no pen there that's not coming from my mind. You know, therefore I realize that my mind makes the pen, which then means I can make a healthy body, I can make a beautiful world, I can make et cetera, based on the seeds that I plant in my mind. So that's that's the big cash out. That's the big cash out. And it's important to, like I said before, to contemplate that in the sense of when we had talked about the pen initially, is to, you can do the same thing with many other objects that you experience throughout the day, but it's just taking a moment to think about that. Where is it coming from? So if you get to the point of convincing yourself that it must be coming from my mind, awesome. Because then you will understand why it's very true to say the entire world is coming from your mind. So therefore I can change the entire world. So how am I going to go about doing that? Sit down and meditate for 5 minutes. Start there, and then it just builds up. So that's a little review. That's a little review. You can see why it's very important. So yeah, let's move along. Let's move along on the map, because we're going to get there. We're going to get to the top eventually. All right. So yes, we were at number 11 with the sense object agitations. And now we'll go to number 12, which is really going back into the second bend in the road, which is representing the third power, which is recollection, bringing the mind back onto the object. So crucial. I mean, this power that we all have is what then advances us or propels us to what will be the third and fourth meditation levels. So here when we had the second, which was contemplating the teaching, so we're thinking about all this stuff when we're not here at the center, that gets us onto the second level where we're keeping our mind on the object, we have moments of brief continuity. Now we're actually starting to get, as we move into this second bend, we're getting a sense of being able to continually, at will, bring our mind back onto the object, which can then propel us into what will be the third level of meditation, which is number 13, which is keeping the mind on the object, but with interruptions, or sometimes often referred to as patches. And the patches, what the patches really stand for is when your mind is off the object. And you can see here that Finn has that hook and chain up. I mean, he's got his recollection up, and now you can see that it's tethered to the elephant, to the mind. I mean, you can see here, I mean, he's just hoping to even get close to that. Here he's like chasing after that thing like a mother. Now he's like caught up to his mind. And he's actually, it's like yes. It's like he's like finally hooked it. Yeah, and the beauty of this is that you're now actually, I mean, thank goodness, this is the difference from the first to the third level, is that, the first level, when we have those meditations, we're off the object of our meditation far more than we're on. But by the third level, you're actually on the object more than you're off. And I was very happy to hear Geshe Michael say this when he said, he believes that most of us are working within those three levels, most of the time. Which to me, I mean, Pshaw with the 9 levels, I was like, third level, that's awesome that I'm actually on the object more than I'm off. Now, at the same time, you have to look at what is on on the elephant, which is probably hard to tell on the smaller maps of this, but right here, these are two little ears on a rabbit. So there's a black rabbit on the elephant. And that little cute, cuddly black rabbit represents subtle dullness. And subtle dullness. Yeah. Which is at the highest levels of in this technique of being able to meditate, that is the one that many would say you're going to contend with. Because it's so challenging to distinguish that fine point of what we talked about, which was we've got fixation, we're on the object, we've got clarity, but it's lacking intensity. That the Tibetan term of nar. And I think the origin of the nar actually is like the temper of a steel blade. And I love that. It's just like, because it's almost like when you think about wielding this thing as a weapon, is kind of like this. It comes down to what kind of blade you're wielding. What is the level of intensity that you're trying to exert to deal with this rabbit? And I think I was thinking about this too. I was like, okay, so what? Why the rabbit? I love rabbits, and I was thinking about you look at a rabbit and it's like how their eyes just seem to be totally fixed, like their little noses are like kind of constantly moving. So they're like constantly breathing. So they're similar to us. So there's a sign of them breathing, but their eyes, so that's just it. So you've got fixation, but then you're lacking that intensity, and that's what becomes the issue then actually for the rest of this journey is or I shouldn't say issue, it becomes a strength that from here on out, from the third meditation on, you actually are able to distinguish between obvious and subtle dullness. And that's huge because, before when we're, moving down here, it's like sometimes you're not even quite sure about that. Is this like, is this some gross form or obvious form or if it's subtle? But from here on out, you can. So really, because it's so significant, let's get into what this is about subtle dullness and nar, the sense of intensity, because we want to keep using it to our advantage as we move through here. In many ways, the subtle dullness is just how turned on you are in the meditation. More specifically, how turned on you are about the meditative object. And it's really apt to actually use that kind of terminology about it. Because you want to be attracted to this virtuous object. And the truth of the matter is that if you're not feeling that, and even whether you have it in a form yet or not, but if you're not feeling, that, then change your object. Because you'll eventually quit. It's just something that, the enlightened ones have really, handed down to us that you'll give up on it. We are so driven by desire. I mean, it's the reason why it's called one of the three poisons. It's just, that's a lot of how we operate. It's a lot of how we operate. So when we do desire something, such as this object we've chosen for our meditation, then we'll keep going. We'll keep going with it. Now that doesn't mean, of course, that when we have the moments when our desire wanes, where we're not feeling that energized, and crisp in the meditation and so forth. That's fine. It's one thing to be wavering in it. It's another thing of that, I haven't felt that at all in weeks. I don't feel much of anything. Then you definitely want to reconsider the object because, and that was one of the things when we talked about why it's so huge who you choose to put in that role, because the arc of that experience that you're building for yourself just continues to grow and deepen. And don't, and certainly by all means don't feel like, oh, holy shit, man, I need to start all over again or something like that. It's okay. I mean, it's okay if you need to change the object at this point. The important thing is to do that. And now you can give more thought to the fact of like, okay, now I understand why they're saying like I should be attracted to it and at it being virtuous. That's an important, that is equally important superlative there as being attracted. That it's virtuous and you're attracted to it. This was a really wonderful wonderful tip, which is, so how can you tell if you're having subtle dullness? Like, what are the ways that you can start to identify if that's what's happening? So one of the things you can do is that when you come out of meditation, for about an hour or two, just kind of watch your behavior and see if you're kind of spaced out or a little forgetful or absent-minded, somewhat like you're stoned or something, in a mild way, because there's a big difference, which I'm sure most of us know, between being spaced out and calm, which is part of what we want to experience coming out of meditation. And one of the ways that you can distinguish between the two, because being spaced out is really actually a pretty unstable state of mind. And you can tell this because for someone, when you're spaced out and you're provoked, you can react harshly or negatively. And someone who's in a calm state of mind doesn't. And there are very subtle ways that you can see that happening, in your life. Like, so you come out and it's, half an hour after you've meditated, something comes up at the office or in your home or something, but you're in a pretty, it's a pretty decent meditation. You were calm coming out of it, and something comes up, and you just see in that moment how you react to it, and you actually are like, all right, I'll take this in and not freak out and so forth. And then there's when you've come out of a meditation that you were like, yeah, I was on the object and so forth, but I'm a little bit soft, feel a little soft, and then something happens, and someone shot me an email today, it was perfect. And the reaction is like, what? It's just like comes right out of you. You're like, wow, okay. I don't think I was so calm in that meditation. I think, and it's like, I think I had a little bit of subtle dullness going on. So it's a very, very useful technique to use. I mean, that's the thing, is like when the sense of coming out of a good meditation is like you come out, and in terms of dullness not being the case, not being what you must have dealt with, is that you're focused and you've got some clarity, and you're somewhat well considered. Your movements are somewhat well considered. Like you're mindful of literally what you're doing or what you're saying. And it doesn't have to be like, you're full on Gandhi in the moment, but it's enough that you notice that like, I'm not going to respond as harshly as they just came at me. you know. Or maybe you even catch yourself as the retaliation is rifling out of you. Like, I'm just going to shut up right now. You know, great, awesome. You know, that is definitely a sign of a useful meditation that happened. Yeah, it's really, this is what's so great about meditating and in going and being around other people, because they'll show you, they'll teach you immediately how well the meditation's going. You know, people are so useful in that way. I'm so grateful to them. All right, moving along. So 15, which is really looking at, let's not forget about the monkey who's in front of the elephant. So he's, you know, once again, he's representing distraction, and the color black is typically representing the agitation. So as we can see, like his whole head is white now, so just like the elephant. So it's beautiful. So he's actually, when he's looking back at the elephant, you know, which is our mind. So he's looking back at the elephant, and that represents the ability to be able to tell when your mind is wandering off. So when that elephant starts wandering off, and then also the ability to be able to refocus the mind back on the object. So that's what his kind of little nod over his shoulder there is indicating, is like, okay, you know, you have those abilities and now use them. Is that, you know, you can see that like your mind is going off once again. Now I'm going to use, you know, both watchfulness and recollection to keep it back on the object. And it's really, it's very encouraging now at this point, because the ability of recollection at this point is so sophisticated that you will now very rarely lose the object. Very rarely. So 16, which is really pointing here to what's going on here between Finn and the elephant, is indicating actually the fourth level of meditation, which is keeping the mind tightly on the object. So it's cool here because you'll see that he's closing the distance now. You know, he's got the hook and chain of recollection and watchfulness on his mind, which is even clearing up even more and more now. There's even more of the elephant here, and also that little bugger rabbit is now starting to lighten up as well, because he's able to keep his mind really tightly on the object. And you know, I just, you know, when I heard initially about keeping it, you know, tightly, is that I really just take that to be is just the fact that, you know, you're not losing the object as often. But what's important to remember here, though, is at this point you still can really have dullness and agitation. That really, so it's that's why this is a process, why it's a journey. But at the fourth level, you've got the fixation now, but you still really can have dullness and agitation interrupt what's going on. So therefore, you really need to use your watchfulness. I mean, that just becomes absolutely essential at this point. All right, I think that's a good place to stop on the map. So let's take a little break. Let some of that soak in, and then we'll come back and do a little bit more on emptiness before we meditate. So there's some great things that are happening with this meditation practice for people, and it's really good. It's really good to share that with each other. You know, both the struggles and then also the advancements. You know, because when you experience the results of people around you doing something good with this, then just think about that again. You know, once again, that plants the seed in your mind of like, oh, this is a good thing. This can do something useful. And so it's very good to share that with one another, particularly when it comes to discussing this concept of emptiness, which is can seem very elusive and philosophical and theoretical, and in many ways we do break it down in a philosophical way, because that seems to be one of our ways at getting to the experience of it. But that's what all this is about, is the experience of it. You know, that's really it. And, you know, so for some of us, it really, you know, and obviously, you know, from His Holiness and all the way back to the original one, is to that they've spent all this time making all these lists, you know, list after list after list, and it's something that for some people that really can be what their path to the experience of it, to the experience of the ultimate nature of how things are working. And there can be many others who, one thing, you know, there's one thing they hear that they understand completely and that they take into meditation, and then they experience it. And so it's very useful to sometimes when you're starting to delve into this concept of emptiness, to start with yourself, or to start with a person in terms of understanding it. And when we had last week spoke about that wonderful example that Geshe Michael gave about when he was driving down the street, you know, at night, and he saw something, you know, go across the road, and he slammed on his brakes and hit his head on the windshield, and you know, nearly killed himself. And when he drove up slowly to, you know, see the object, because he was really convinced it was a mouse, and he rolled down the window and he looked and saw that it was a leaf. So what he thought was there, what he thought was the object, was not the object. That mouse that he thought he saw, that was the gotcha. And the leaf, when he looked at that, in that moment he made contact with the thing, with the object that he had imagined. You know, the object that he thought he saw. And this is a very important fine point, and that is that until we make contact with the things that we're imagining, we'll never be able to realize that they were never there. Until you can identify the thing that you thought was there, you'll never be able to establish that it wasn't there. And in our minds, we'll call that a paradox. An enlightened mind, which might be in this room, looks at that and says, yeah, right. Of course. It's the only way you could experience it. You know, somehow our mind is adulterating reality and making it unreal, and we've got to figure out what we're doing wrong in that way. And that's part of what using the understanding of emptiness can get to, is that in the most profound way, that if I can't identify the me that doesn't exist the way I think it does, then I won't ever be able to let that go. There's a number of people that have come up to me and talked about the tough times that they're going through and so forth. And there is what we often talk about, which is renunciation, which is that we talked about on day one of this series, which is that to get clear on the fact of what the deal is here. This is going to be 6 feet under at some point. That's the deal, seemingly. So many of us that are treading along this path are looking at the fact of so that's what I want to let go of. I want to let go of this suffering self. I don't want myself or anybody else to experience this pain anymore. But once again, it's like using the analogy of that, you can't how's the best way to put this? If you can't see the target, you can't hit it with an arrow. If you can't identify the criminal, you can't apprehend them. It's like if you don't know what you're doing wrong with the object, then how can you ever stop doing that? Doing whatever it is that you're doing wrong. And this is why we must identify the me that doesn't exist the way we think it does. Now, thankfully, in this path, they just give 2 ways. There's 2 ways of canceling something out. And that is that you either prove something doesn't exist, or you prove that something is not something, which is how you would be getting at the emptiness of something. And there are, thankfully, kind of 3 ways that we can phrase this. This kind of synonyms for the me that doesn't exist the way I think it exists. And instead of me saying me all the time, let's use something prettier than me. Lily, that's better. So, in terms of being able to talk about the Lily that doesn't exist the way we think she exists, you could phrase it in terms of it would be the real and unreal, or the nature in the natural that we say when something is not natural, or what we've already used actually, which is that it doesn't come from its own side. So there's a kind of just 3 other approaches to understanding the Lily that doesn't exist. That's the real and unreal. It's the nature in the natural, which is unnatural. It's the thing that doesn't come from its own side. So the Lily that we're talking about when we say Lily is not Lily, what the hell does that mean? what is the significance?
Self-existence. If we cannot Lily, then she has a self-existence in and of herself.
If she's not Lily?
If there is a not Lily.
Mm-hmm. In terms of, so does the lack of Lily have a nature?
There would be an absence of lily.
Yes. That would be the emptiness.
Yes.
That would be the gakcha. That's exactly it. You know, the lily that's not there, the way we're talking about this right now, that would be a lily that wouldn't depend on anything else. It would be a lily that could exist without its proper causes. Or another way you could put it is that it would be a lily that could exist without being in relationship to anything else. That's the lily that doesn't exist. That's the lily that's not there. And just like that experience that Geshe Michael had, you know, we've been driving down the road in our life and slamming on the brakes for something that hasn't existed, time and time again. So this is what the point is when trying to get at the root of it, which is, once again, if we understand, like you had just pointed out, the absence, then we really understand the possibility of our situation here. We understand the potential to be able to affect real change in our life, in our world. That's what all this is about. And keep reminding yourself of that. That's what takes it off of this philosophical shelf of just seeming like kind of twisting analogies, like trying to twist your mind around it, down to like, okay, well, the reason I want to get at this is because then I will understand how everything is possible, and I can do something about that by the way that I act and the way that I think. And the way to really be able to create the causes for that to happen is in your meditation. And this particular one, I mean, it has the potential to just literally, just light up your entire world in a single day. You can come out and you won't even be able to really articulate it. You can be like, something happened in there. And then you'll say, like, I want it to happen again, you know? I mean, as they say, you know, and this is not particular to Buddhism and so forth, but that all the most profound experiences are beyond language. That's for a reason. Because that language is a concept in and of itself. And so when we use that label of emptiness, it's the same thing. It's so beautiful because it's saying emptiness. It is empty of being able to be labeled as anything. You know, we only need to use that word right now to help us get to understanding the truth of that, to knowing it, feeling it, experiencing it, and in using it for the purpose of improving the whole situation here for everybody. I mean, that's just it. To really improving the situation for ourselves and every other living being, the rabbit on the elephant, the ants that are crawling all over your food that you left out, for everyone. So let's take that into meditation. Let's do one more. So just relax. Roll those shoulders back once and let them settle. Push down with your butt to sit up straight. Level out your head by dropping your chin a little bit. And release any tension you might have in your forehead or around your eyes, around your mouth. Just relax your face. And please start to watch your breath. Your mind is tied to the breath and nothing else. There's no other connection to any other object. Go to your golden room on top of the mountainside. The feeling of the light shining in the room is very soft, peaceful, warm, like the lights of a Christmas tree. Look out the window up above at the blue sky. Gaze at the mountains across the valley. Ask your teacher to come and sit with you. Look at their face. Just stay there. Be satisfied, be happy, be content with nothing more than that. Their loving eyes looking at your eyes. Stay quiet and content in your golden room. You don't need anything else. This is sustenance for your mind and your body. Slowly come back into this room. And you can open your eyes. So please continue to try to do this at least twice a day for yourself, and really find those sweet times for you to do it, because that's what you give yourself to build up from. So don't. Some of us, depending on your personality, sometimes are like, well, that's tougher, so I'll do it then. Some of us operate in that way. But if you do that, and then you find that the meditation was pretty damn tough, it didn't go so well, try another time. Like I said, it's just 5 minutes, and you can give yourself that at least twice a day. We also have some really wonderful things coming up here at the center. Starting on this Saturday is this like world music, kirtan, and meditation. So very, very apt for us. These wonderful guest artists are coming in to perform Saturday night, and Cliff Spencer will also be doing a wonderful meditation that night. So if you've never meditated with him, don't miss out on that alone. Plus all of what looks to be some awesome music, because this is the first time these guys have been here. And then we also have, Cliff will begin teaching on Monday night a course that's referred to as the Bodhisattva Vows course, which is, sometimes we use the analogy of a bodhisattva being like a superhero. But in some ways, they're superheroes, but they don't really have the cape on. They're people who are sitting in this room right now, and their whole drive is to basically is to do this, to meditate, to know emptiness completely, so that they can help others come to have that same experience, and basically be blissed out for all eternity. So it's kind of it's a short goal, and but the most important thing is it's an achievable goal. So this course, what it does is that there are vows that that a bodhisattva takes on, which basically really are things that you've always wanted to stop doing. These vows help you do that. Things that you're like, you know what, I really hate it when I lie. You know, I really don't like it when I do that. I don't really like it when I embellish the truth or exaggerate what really happened. And what this, these are the things that a bodhisattva takes up to say, all right, now I don't need to do that anymore. And that's freedom. That's freedom, one by one. And so Cliff will be teaching on that for a couple of weeks, and it's a beautiful course. It is absolutely beautiful to see the ways in which you can start to make your life a hell of a lot easier, and easier for everyone you encounter as well. And then on Tuesdays, which I think just started this week, but it'd certainly be fun to jump in next week, is we have a guest teacher here as well, Rosa, who is teaching about the four forces, or the four powers, which there was someone here last week who had asked me about them in terms of, this is what you can do when something happens, or something that's already happened, that you feel bad about, that you really want to do something about. And as we've been talking throughout tonight, it all starts with what's going on in your mind. What are you doing with it in your mind before you maybe physically go do something to make amends? So this practice is 4 very simple steps of where you did just lie, and you don't have the cojones in the moment to tell them the truth, but then you do think to yourself, I'm sorry that I did this, and I take refuge in the fact of that this is not self-existently the case, and that I don't want to create the causes to lie again. So that would be taking refuge in your highest ideals. And then you say, and for a particular amount of time, I will not do this again. I will not lie for the next 5 minutes. And that's important. I say that because you make it manageable. You make it manageable. Sometimes it's like, I am not going to lie ever again. Do not do that to yourself. And then all of us are pretty wise as to what usually happens in those instances. So you say for a specific period of time, I'm not going to do this. And this is the one that, like, whoever thought this one up, I was like, oh yeah, they know that's really the tough one, which is that, and now I'm going to do something to make up for it. Restitution. So that's the one that's a little bit, that's the kicker on that. Because then it's like, I lied to them. So maybe it's the matter of that you go right then and tell them the truth. Or it's like, I'm really too scared to do that, and I have all these other shameful reasons. So then it's that you commit to the fact of that, but I will tell this person the truth. So there are countless things that you can do. So she's going to be basically over, I think, just the Tuesdays of this month, going through those 4 forces, the 4 powers. And it's an awesome practice to be able to do. So that's what's going to be going on here at the center this month. It's going to be a lot of energy flowing through here. And please, as we talk about each week, do some yoga, however that might be for you. Yoga can be just walking around the block. But if you're going to do that, do it with the motivation of saying, so I can meditate better. Literally just think that. I'm going to take a walk around the block so that next time I sit, my back is not going to be killing me. My knees won't be hurting. I'll be able to stay single-pointedly fixed on my object the whole time I meditate. Yeah, please do that. And please give what you can to this center, which is your center. So you can keep on coming back, and there's somewhere to keep coming back to receive this. So enjoy the week. Thank you very much, everyone.